Let's move on to another story now, the next one, which is this conversation. In fast-moving African markets, perception often moves faster than press releases. A leadership decision taken in a boardroom today can be debated on WhatsApp groups, radio talk shows, and social media within hours. Yet many organizations still treat communication as something that happens after strategy is finalized. Well, to help us understand why that approach can be risky, we're now joined by Laila Bastati, who's the Chief Commercial Officer at the APO Group. That's one of Africa's leading communications consultancies, and she advises global and African leaders on how to communicate effectively across complex and diverse markets. Laila, thanks very much indeed for joining us, and welcome.
Good morning, Peter. Thank you very much for having me.
Laila, you've argued that in many African markets, communication begins the moment a decision is made, not when it's announced. Why do so many leaders, do you think, underestimate how quickly narratives start forming?
I think that the most common mistake that they do in Africa specifically, it is definitely treating the continent as one market, and also not bringing, as you were saying, communications into decision-making from the start. So on the first point, obviously, the continent has 54 distinct environments. You have different languages, different operating systems, different ways of doing business, different media ecosystems. And at APO Group, we see this constantly, whether it is working with fintech companies expanding or supporting major events, major continental events like the International Olympic Committee, Youth Olympic Games in Dakar, or African Energy Week. The pattern is very, very clear. What works in Kenya does not work in Nigeria. What works in South Africa does not necessarily resonate in Egypt. And so if you get this wrong, even the best decision can land as a backlash. And on the second point, in Africa, communications moves really, really fast, and much faster than what international companies are used to. And if you don't think how the decision will be received when you are creating it, then you've already failed. And so as you quoted me, say my advice is always bring communication into the boardroom, and not just to write statements, but really to shape the decisions, because communications shouldn't be something that you do after. It has to be part of the decision itself. And I think it's
I guess there's a lot of corporations beyond our continent that don't think that Africa is as advanced and socially tech clever as the rest of the world, and that we're really up there and moving quite quickly with it.
Very much so. And it's a shift that I'm seeing coming, though. You are seeing more and more companies, African born and bred companies, taking charge of their narrative. And so finally, you see this shift whereby the story of Africa is no longer told by journalists or media outside of Africa, but is taken care of by its own journalists.
And perhaps briefly, if you had to give one clear piece of advice to CEOs operating in African markets today, particularly in an era of economic uncertainty and digital acceleration, what mindset shift should they adopt about communication and leadership?
I might sound like a broken record, but the biggest advice for me would be really stop thinking that communication happens after you've made the decision. The leaders and the companies that we see succeeding is that the ones that are treating communications like what I like to call decision insurance. So they design decisions that account for how they will land, before they are finalized. So they truly bring communications expertise into the room while decisions are being made. And another important point is that they need to rely to partners that understand the nuances. Because in those markets where communications move fast and misinterpretation sometimes is the way that things happen, you really don't want to buy an insurance after your house is already on fire.
Laila, we're going to have to leave it there, unfortunately, but great advice. Thank you so much indeed. I think we need to talk again soon.
Thank you so much.